today. I mean the moderator of the program. So today we have yet another interesting episode of Bantaba. At Bantaba we get to talk about some of the issues that relate to Africa. We've had several sessions, several episodes of Bantaba in the past, and most recently we've now been having the panel discussion. We had the first one a few weeks ago, and this is the second panel discussion we're having as relates to Bantaba. And in the last time we talked about colonization and all of that, and it was really an interesting and amazing time. And we're really excited and happy to see each one of you. And I trust you're doing great. Hope you're fine. Hope everything is okay. If everything is okay, just smile to see. So before we continue, can anyone try to guess what topic we're going to treat today? Like, do you have an idea of what we're going to discuss today? Can you tell me? What do you think?
I think maybe food.
Oh really? Do you like food?
What's
What's your favorite food?
I don't know. I like pizza.
Oh, pizza. Okay, can you try to guess what topic we're going to have today?
I guess energy and maybe tools to supply African countries with food.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Any other hints? Okay, I think you all are actually very correct. That's what we're going to discuss today. So yeah, as a way of introduction, I'm going to present a short presentation to you all, and I really hope you're going to enjoy it, you're going to like it, and it's going to be interesting for you. Once again, I'm Elijah, and welcome to Bantaba. Okay, so that is the topic right there for us: energy crisis and food insecurity in Africa. So we're going to talk about briefly, just as a presentation, about energy crisis and food insecurity. Actually, Africa is quite a blessed continent, but of course, just like every other continent, Africa has its unique problems, and today we're going to look at one of those unique problems. So energy crisis, basically it's the shortage of energy supply to an economy, maybe to a country, a people. Yeah, that's when there's no enough energy supply in terms of electricity, in terms of power, and all of that. So we're going to look at the problems of energy crisis and then food insecurity. Actually, Africa is really a blessed continent, just like I said earlier, but again, they have some problems about food, either in the shortage of nutrients or maybe like absence of some kind of foods they like. So we're going to actually talk about it. And I think these two issues, right, are very important, like for the existence and the development of a people. So if, for example, the people do not have maybe adequate food supply, it's going to affect their basic sustenance, their basic survival. And if there is energy crisis, then it's going to hinder their development, and it's going to hinder the progress they're going to make. So this topic today is really an interesting one because it deals with the basic survival and sustenance and development of a people. Okay, so the next slide. Okay, like I said earlier, it's blessed, but yet it's quite paradoxical. And I wrote here the paradox. It's a paradox because Africa gets the most sun amongst all the continents. I mean, sometimes when you just think about Africa, you just seem like a very hot continent, and in your mind, like, if you don't use sunscreen, you're going to burn and all of that. So yeah, basically, Africa gets the most sun amongst all the continents. It receives more hours of bright sunlight. In some countries, you have winter seasons, and maybe for 4 months, the sun is there, but you can't really feel it. But in Africa, all year round, the sun is shining and all of that. And I say this for a particular reason. I'm going to tell you why I put this up. And then Africa covers about 20% of the Earth's land area. Africa has close to 1,200 million hectares of agricultural land. That's a stat, which is about 40% of Africa's total land area. In fact, Africa has over 70% of the world's total arable land. So what I'm trying to say here is the fact that for a continent that has so much sunlight, which can be transformed to solar power and all of that, why then is that continent facing energy crisis. And for a continent that is so blessed with land that is really arable, if you consider Africa's land, like I said earlier, over 40% of Africa's land is arable land. It supports farming activities, and whatsoever you farm on the African soil is going to germinate, and it's going to germinate so well. So why then do they have problems with food crisis and food insecurity? So it's quite paradoxical. It's like you're blessed, but at the same time, seems you cannot truly use what you have. So that's what we're going to look at today. The next slide. Okay, so Africa, what then is the problem? Like the previous slide, right? We saw that a lot of sunlight, arable land, fertile land. What then truly is the problem? Yeah. So now talking about food insecurity, for example, we have countries like Belgium, countries like Israel. Belgium, right? The agricultural exports of Belgium is over $3 billion on a yearly basis, and the size of Belgium is barely, I think, 22,000 square kilometers. And using Nigeria as a case study, Nigeria has a size of 923,000 square kilometers. Belgium would go into Nigeria over, I mean, if you do mathematics, 922,000 divided by 22,000, that's over 20 times probably, like, yet, and Nigeria's land is really much arable than Belgium's land. So why then do they have a greater export agriculturally at the end of the year than Nigeria? And of course, it still points back to the issue of energy crisis. So for example, if you're still depending on maybe just using your hoe or some local farming methods to produce food, the outcome is not going to really be so much effective. But when you use technology, when you bring in some things that are going to really help to scale your agricultural production, then you're truly going to benefit. Israel is another case study. Israel, actually, I think they produce, like, their annual export agriculturally is over $5 billion on a yearly basis. And it's sad that Africa, on the other hand, that is really blessed, is not producing up to this. And if you talk about size, Africa is really big. I mean, African countries are large. Brazil, for example, is the 5th largest country in the world, right? And as a result of that size, they are among the top 5 agricultural exporting countries in the world. Like, they produce a lot. I think yearly it runs into over $85 billion on a yearly basis. And then because of their size, they're big. So I think it's kind of directly proportional. If a country is large and is blessed, then it should be able to produce more. So Africa truly has a problem in this regards. And yeah, what I'm doing is just, should I say, a prelude to what our panelists are going to discuss, what I'm going to talk about. So I'm just trying to form ideas in your mind. I'm just trying to form opinions for you. So yeah, you can ask questions and you're going to understand everything much more better. So these are some of the problems. One, limited access to modern energy infrastructure. It's a problem and it affects the food security in Africa. We have reliance on traditional biomass when people are still using maybe trees, they cut down trees to produce fire, so it leads to a shortage of the necessary energy they should get. And then inadequate investment in energy generation and distribution. This is actually a problem from the government and probably the stakeholders. There's a poor investment in this particular energy field and in food. There's actually a story I read, I think just this morning, and I really felt sad reading this because it's something that happened in 1980 something. So we have a former Nigerian leader, Ibrahim Babangida. So the history I read about him was the fact that he became the head of state. There was a military coup, he took over government, it's like he was in the military. So he was military head of Nigeria. And then what he did was he took Nigeria's money, went to Cote d'Ivoire and Benin Republic, built refineries in those two countries. So now, just to give a background of this story, Nigeria is one amongst the top 10 oil producing countries in the world. Nigeria produces so much oil, and it's just natural to think about oil producing countries are supposed to have money because, I mean, countries, Russia, of course, we know that Russia is one of the biggest producers of oil in the world, and it helps the economy and all of that. So if Nigeria is among the top 10 oil producing countries in the world, this guy would take crude oil from Nigeria. He went to build refineries in other countries. So he would take the crude oil from Nigeria as the head of state, take it to those countries, process it in those refineries, import it back into the country, and sells it to Nigerians as his own personal business. That's really sad, and that's one of the problems that has led to all of this energy crisis and food crisis. An oil-producing country buying oil products, diesel, fuel, and all of that at very expensive rates. So it just tells about the fact that the leadership plays a very big role in affecting the lives of the people. And then, of course, we have political instability when there are crises in terms of politics, like maybe there's a change of government, and then the new guy is like, I did not like what the former president was doing, and then he stops everything completely to start his own ideas, to start his own project. There's no flow or continuity, and it affects the development of this particular area. And then, of course, we have poverty and unequal distribution of wealth. We have climate change and conflicts and displacement. Conflicts and displacement, I think this one is really, really important. It plays a very big role in the food insecurity issue in Africa. I come from Benue State of Nigeria, and I'm just using this as a case study for the entire Africa. So Benue State, right, is referred to as the food basket of the nation, and it has this name because it produces lots of cassava, rice, beans, like literally various forms of food, crops, and all of that for the country. But then in recent years, there have been lots of crises, conflict, some inter-ethnic crises, people are fighting, and the government seems to be helpless. So the farmers who are cultivating the farmlands and all of that, they have to leave where they're staying to go find refuge in internally displaced person's camp, so they're not carrying out their businesses again. You see, at the end of the day, all of this leads to food insecurity in the country. You have the land, you have people who are willing to carry out all of this, but because of the conflict, because of insecurity, they're not able to carry out their day-to-day businesses. And of course, we have poor agricultural policies and investment, and lack of access to modern farming technology. So these are some of the issues, these are some of the problems that has created a food insecurity problem in Africa. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so now I mentioned that Africa has the most access to the sun, like literally amongst all the continents, because when Africa is hot, it gets the most sun and all of that. So we have some renewable energy solutions that literally people should think about and try to utilize to produce, like to help curtail the effects of this energy crisis. Of course, there are some countries that have done really well in that regard. Egypt, one example, they've had several investments running into billions of dollars. They've installed, they've put in place some solar generating plants, and it has really helped the economy one, and it has helped to fight the energy crisis in that particular country. Some other countries are doing well, but of course some needs to do better. So yeah, I think if truly most African countries look into this regards by going into solar, and then of course transforming wind as well, and probably using water like to generate electricity, it's going to help curb some of the problems of energy crisis on the continent. Okay, so now what are truly the effects of energy crisis and food insecurity in Africa? One, low productivity. So for example, people want to work, and then you go to work and there's energy shortage, like power outage, like literally the lights go off. So one, it affects your work, and even in businesses, I've read a story online where a particular guy, he was into agricultural business, and he had lots of fishes, and he had lots of poultry and all of that, like in thousands. And then for about 1 or 2 days, there was power outage, like there was no light, electricity was cut off, and all the fishes and all the poultry, literally, they got choked by the heat, and then there was nothing to do about it. They died. Like that was a business running into millions of naira. It went down. So yeah, when there are energy crisis and food insecurity, it leads to low productivity, continuous loss of money, and it leads to the general poverty of the people, and of course health challenges as well. For example, you're working as a doctor in the hospital, and then you have a patient, you are trying to work on the patient, you're connecting him to the life support. Imagine the lights now going off. you've lost your patient. So yeah, it affects the health of the people and several other areas actually. So these are some of the problems. Okay, so what then truly are the solutions to food insecurity in Africa? Since we've seen the problems, we now know that energy crisis is, it has gone before, but yeah, we've seen the problems and we know that this is a real issue. What then are the problems? And it's at that point that we are now going to constitute our panel today, and we're going to interact with them, we're going to ask them questions, and through them we'll know what truly, how these problems came about and what the solutions to these problems are. So thank you so much for your apt attention, thank you for listening. And then I would like to invite the panelists to come up now as we go straight to the panel discussion. So today we're going to have some erudite African scholars. They are really doing well in their chosen specialties, and we've had them before. If you've listened to them speak, if you've listened to them answer questions, you truly know that they are loaded, they are truly who they think they are. So yeah, we're going to have on the panel today our very senior Eben. He's one of the panelists. Let's clap as he comes out, please. Senior Eben, you're welcome to the panel. And then we're also going to have Sir Senior Mendy, Peter Mendy. He's also one of our panelists. You're welcome, sir. And we have a very beautiful lady in the house. She's actually the vice president of the African Association. She has always been our host in our programs, like literally all the episodes of Bantaba. And she's here yet again with us. Her name is Christina. She's going to be the anchor of the program. Thank you so much. Christina, you're welcome. Let's clap at you.
Hello guys, thank you so much for showing up today. We really appreciate you coming on the show. And to our panelists, thank you once again for showing up and wanting to impact the knowledge you have on everyone else. So, like we said earlier, we're going to be discussing food insecurity and energy crisis in African countries. So, the first section is going to be open discussion with the panelists. We're going to ask them a few questions and they would talk to the public, and the second half is going to be questions from the audience. So we hope you really get your questions ready. So if there is anything that is not clear enough, you can ask the panelists after the open discussion. Okay? Thank you so much. So we have Sila Ben and Simon Peter once again. Thank you. Please can we give them a round of applause? Thank you very much, guys. So I hope you guys are ready for us today.
Well, I think before we start, I will just maybe put out a disclaimer there that, you know, Elijah put out a slide there that we know it all. Actually, we don't know it all, and we are not experts. Of course, as you would know, I'm a student of international relations and he's a student of hygiene, PhD student. So this is not actually a field. So, and the other thing is energy and food insecurity. It involves a lot of like technicalities. Like it's a very technical stuff. Even like when going through the reading and the research and all that stuff, like there are lots of figures like statistics. You can't put everything like in your head, like really. But it's of course a concerning issue for us as Africans, you know. So maybe what we will be doing, I think it's trying to offer, you know, the best opinion as we can, or the best explanation as we understand things, you know, as we see things, and particularly lean towards mostly the political side of things, you know. So we might maybe run away from the technicalities a little bit, and then move to the political side much more, you know, to kind of, I think that way we'll be able to contribute and offer what we know more. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think just as Sir Peter said, we don't know it all because you're not experts in that field. I'm just a public health person. Except to say that public health is very important because it concerns the health of the entire population. And so we are much interested in every other field, be it international relations, food security, climate change, everything. I am interested in it because I know that they want to make sure that everything that happens in the country and around the world you know, come together to improve the overall health status of people. Yeah, so we don't know it all, but we'll try our best.
Okay, thank you very much, Samintu Peter and Sarah Eben. In as much as we want to talk about food insecurity and energy crisis, first of all, I'd like you to expatiate on the correlation between energy crisis and food insecurity, or much more better, if you tell us the relationship between food and energy. Snake Ben.
Okay, I'm quite nervous and asking me this first question. Okay, all right. So the point about food security is look at how people can have physical access, economical access, and then social access to food. Not just food, but nutritious food, and then also food of their choice, right? So that is about food security. So once people don't have physical access, as in the presence of food itself, right, and then economical access, you know, one thing that's very painful is you are hungry, food is there, but you cannot afford. So that is the economical barrier. And then also social needs of people. Food forms a major part of the culture of a group of people. So when, because of poverty, you don't have access to food to celebrate your cultural values, it becomes very difficult. So that is about food security. And then energy crisis, okay, these days with much emphasis placed on climate change has become an integral aspect of energy crisis. So that energy crisis, in my view, is not just about the absence of energy, but also the major sources of energy that actually are harmful to the environment. So energy crisis in Africa, of course, maybe as time goes on, we'll realize that we don't contribute much to climate change because we don't produce a lot of energy. However, with the little production that we make, you realize that most of them are from non-renewable resources, which do not help. So how do we get the relationship between food and energy? Of course, we need energy to cook food, and we need food to produce energy. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Samintu Peter, before you give your take, I was just informed that we have an online speaker, Mr. Alex Ngaren Mao. We acknowledge you for being here today. Thank you very much. And to our online audience, we appreciate you for being here. So we hope you learned something big from our discussion today.
Yeah, so I will just pick up on Senior Eben's final comment that we need energy to produce food, and we also need food to produce energy. I think that's the correlation there. In Elijah's presentation also showed that one of the reasons, I believe, one of the reasons why we can't have this massive production of food in Africa, particularly when you compare a country like Belgium with a country like Nigeria, even the Congo Democratic Republic, which is very fertile also, but cannot produce like Belgium. Why? Because I believe in Belgium, there is this capacity also to actually supply energy non-stop. And agriculture is mechanized in these parts of the world. So then the crops are well irrigated. The farmlands are well irrigated, and that needs energy, to pump in water. And electricity doesn't, I believe, go off. In countries like Belgium and other industrialized countries, you have constant supply of energy, particularly maybe the whole countries are even covered. In most of this world, even in African countries, you'll find that countries like in North Africa, for example, they have this almost 100% coverage of electricity supply. So in industrialized nations also, they have the same thing. So that is why they are always able to power their farmlands and produce a lot of food supplies. In Africa, I think the situation is kind of we know it's actually very there. The continent is not well covered when it comes to electricity supply. North Africans are doing well, like I mentioned earlier. They have near 100% coverage. But when it comes to sub-Saharan Africa, we do not have that. There are like just a few countries actually that are doing well. Ghana, for example, Ghana does well. I think Ghana has this about 70% supply. 86% supply, in Ghana. And then you have countries like Rwanda, you have countries like Cape Verde, who have about, I think, 95% of supply. But when you come to countries like Sierra Leone, Gambia, other countries do not have that much supply of electricity, then food production becomes a problem. Now, food production, what you end up doing is maintain the traditional ways of producing foods, that is using our hands, which is actually not so, because usually it's on a small scale, because you can't use your hands to like cultivate hectares of land. You need machinery to do that, and this machinery also has to be powered by oil, in order to make that large scale production of food. So of course, yeah, the two are actually very much interlinked. Again, one more point. Energy is the lifeblood of any economy. Energy is the lifeblood of any economy. Without energy, nothing works. Our computers don't work, our cars don't work, and then we become stagnant. So I think it's a problem in Africa. If Africa has to be, if it has to develop, I think it has to solve this problem of energy. No country can develop without actually solving this issue.
Thank you very much for the wonderful answers from Mr. Peter and Mr. Ibe. Now, the next question, what do you think is hindering, or we can say factors, what are the factors hindering energy access in most African countries? Is it because we don't have enough development, or because we don't have enough support from international bodies, or what are the factors, what are the basic things that we can say are affecting energy access in African countries?
Thank you very much for this question, and this is very emotional because we have it all in Africa. We have it. It's not saying we don't have it. If you look at manganese, platinum, and another very valuable, resource, 80% of the entire world, source is in Africa. 80%. My country has lithium, we have manganese, we have everything, yet we are suffering from power crisis. So, what is hindering us from becoming truly independent people? Because when Ghana had its independence, actually the first sub-Saharan African country to have gained independence in 1957, the then president or prime minister first, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, said, Africa is capable of managing its resources. Africa is capable, but many years down the line, can we say we are capable or we are not capable? I think where the problem lies is, it is one thing to have the natural resources, and another thing to have the technical know-how to turn those natural resources into useful goods. Does Africa have the technical know-how? Do you have the ability to train people to have the technical know-how to be able to turn these vast untapped natural resources that we have into energy for Africa? The answer is yes. Why? By 2050, about 1 in every 4 individuals on Earth is going to be an African. The median age of Africa is around 18 to 19 years. Currently, the population of Africa is growing, and Africa's population is young. What it means is that we have a lot of young people like ourselves who have the strength, the knowledge, the ability to be able to turn things around. Where then is the challenge? Is it leadership? Is it governance? I do not know. God has blessed Africa with 3 very important natural resources. Natural, 1, If you go to the depth of our oceans, we have crude oil, we have petroleum products, we have vast deposit of fossils in our oceans. Our soil is very rich. In this part of the world, you have winter, normally from, when does it start? Maybe from December, January, February, March, April, that's 5 months. You can't grow anything, nothing will grow. In our part of the blessed continent, we have just 2 seasons, the rainy season and then the Harmattan season, right? So during the rainy season, we produce some food crops, and then in the Harmattan too, it will interest you to know that some crops actually do well in Africa where there is not a lot of water. So if you come to Ghana, for instance, in the northern part, it's quite hot over there. It's not as warm as in the southern. However, the quantity of food the northern part produces actually feeds, a big proportion of the citizens of the country. So where is the problem? I ask myself. Because I cannot identify any single reason, I can't, why Africa should have a challenge with food and energy. Now, in Africa, about 70% of the people have their livelihoods from agriculture. What does it mean? What it means is that we have a lot of people who are either directly into agriculture or indirectly into agriculture. There's common sense. If you have a group of 10 people, 7 are busy with food, 3 are busy with other things. Do the 7 and the remaining 3 have any reason at all to complain of hunger? I think your answer is as good as mine. So where is the problem? What did we do?
Yeah, I think it's actually well said. I would just add that we have a problem of developing infrastructure when it comes to energy generation in Africa, because most of our regions are very far from the center, and usually energy supply focuses on the centers, like the urban areas, like the cities, and then the rural areas where most of the people live are actually neglected. Now, how do you, and those people, like even rightly mentioned, those people now living in the rural areas are the ones that actually produces what we eat. They are the ones who produce what we eat. But then how do you get energy supply to those rural areas? One could be, and perhaps the most sustainable way and affordable way for African countries is the construction of grids, electricity grids, now supplied to the rural areas. But then it's challenging again because of the distance. And again, I'm not a technical expert in this, but the moment energy starts moving, its power slows down. Of course, that doesn't mean that the states should not be able to supply to the rural areas, but again, constructing even this infrastructure from where the energy is generated, from the power plants to the rural areas, that's like miles, sometimes kilometers, away from the power plants. The other way of perhaps energy generation, which is solar, Elijah rightly mentioned, should be something that we actually tap. But actually, solar is also expensive. Solar panels are expensive. I was looking at an article which actually said, I think generation of some solar panel could cost about $1,600 to about $3,000. Now, who can afford that? How many people can afford that in Africa? Of course, people have already started building solar panels like on their rooftops to supply energy. But if you need that like on a massive scale, it requires a lot of money. It requires a lot of investment. And right now, we do not have that. I'll come to the reason. I have a problem with investment because all the time when they go to conferences, it's mostly about financing. We need money, we need financing, waiting for the financing to come from Europe, always. I'll get to that. But the thing is, Now in Africa, if you look at the Sahara Desert, for example, which is actually abundant in energy supply, like from the sun, Southern Africa also has a lot of like space where the sun directly kind of hits the ground. East Africa, West Africa, of course we also have it, but at least these other regions are more abundant in energy supply. But then to construct these solar panels, for example, in the Sahara Desert, how much does it cost? And how many panels do you have to build in the Sahara Desert in order to be able to supply the whole of Africa? Of course, you can do it, but of course, it also requires a lot of technology, which we do not have, and a lot of finance and a lot of money, which we also do not have currently. But it alone, the Sahara Desert alone, should be able, of course, to supply the whole of Africa. Now, the issue of financing, I see it both ways. Of course, it's a problem, we don't have the money, but should we wait for it? Should we wait for the financing to come? What if it doesn't come? What if it doesn't come? Or what if it doesn't come like in the right amounts that we need? I don't think we have to wait for that. It falls back to who? It falls back to us to do the work. Because to their credit, those that have the technology did not wait for anybody, to be frank. They did not wait for anybody, and the technology did not actually fall from heaven. People actually toiled and worked for it. Can we do the same in Africa? Why do we just have to sit down and wait for technology to come and wait for financing to come? I believe some students here are students of international relations. We know about the NPT, the Non-Proliferation Treaty that was signed, like is it 1970 invented force. That treaty also has what? That countries that have this nuclear power generation, right? Of course, we know you can use that to generate nuclear weapons, but you can also use that to generate electricity, right? And that technology should be shared with countries that do not have the technology. Is it shared? How many countries have the technology today? Now that hasn't happened. Why do you expect this time that this technology with solar is going to be given to us? Because there's a lot of money that they are putting into it, and there's a lot of work. If you need it, you have to buy it. If you need it, you have to buy it from them. And it's very expensive because it's investors that are putting their money in it. So let's not wait for it. If you have any students of electrical engineering here, maybe, I don't know, who deal with nuclear power engineering. I was talking to a friend of mine. We came to Russia together. He's studying in Moscow and he's studying nuclear physics. Perhaps maybe he's even in. I sent him the link. He's studying nuclear engineering and thermodynamics. I was like, you are the guy I've been looking for. You have to come back to the Gambia and solve our electricity problem. This is what we need. This is why you're going to school. We don't have to wait for anybody. We have to try and do it ourselves. Because even that itself, like there are some things that you shouldn't say, but even that itself, when it comes to nuclear energy particularly, people are unwilling. Nations, states are unwilling to share it. Because sometimes it's dangerous, we know that. But nuclear energy, they say it's the most, sustainable form of energy. Solar could be expensive, but nuclear, it's like the most sustainable. So they say, but solar, nuclear, I'm in for any. But my point is, we have problems of technology, we have problems of infrastructure, we have problems of financing, but we should not wait for anybody. And then you come to the leadership. You need leadership to drive that, to organize people, to organize our education system, like we talked about the last time, to join towards solving Africa's problems. We should not wait for anybody to come and solve our problems. We need leaders for that.
I have just one or two things to add. You see, the thing is, now globally, people are advocating for renewable sources of energy because of climate change. Many years ago, when we didn't have this issue, we were doing our things our own way. Yet still, even in those days, when people were not, a lot of people were not using solar energy and they were still following on fossil fuels, Africa was still behind. So the thing is, I don't think we should be chasing the developed countries. I don't think we should be trying to force ourselves to meet their standard. And I'm saying this because of my personal reservations about the Sustainable Development Goals. We all come from different backgrounds. Africa is poor. Now you go and set of rich people and we set the same goals for the rich country and the poor country to meet. What about African Development Plan? Do we have it? What I was saying, by 2050, Africa is going to generate 90%, right? We're going to turn 90% of our natural resources into finished goods in Africa. No one's talking about that. So if you don't tackle the main issues that's confronting Africa, we can always talk about sustainable development goals. It will come and go. Another set of goals are going to come. And sustainable development goals are going to end just 4 years. And in just 4 years, that is 6 years, in 2030, Africa is behind. A lot of people are in poverty. It looks funny to say that the second goal is that we're going to end poverty, if I'm right, by 2030. It's funny. Africa has to sit down and solve its own problems. 3 things: work on your people, your youth, who have the strength. Learn how to turn your natural resources into finished goods. If I were an African president, every other natural resource that is left in the country will be left untapped until such a time that Africa or that country has the full capacity in terms of people to turn those natural resources into finished goods. So it is not just about chasing people's solar panels. It's not just about chasing wind energy and what have you. They will still try to meet their standard, and they will still, in future, they will still find another thing. And we will drop the progress that we have and still chase after the standards that the rich countries are setting for us. Africa is behind. Let us accept that Africa is behind and find African solutions to our own problems and forget about the standards that are being set by the rich countries, because no matter what, we won't meet that standard. We failed in Millennium Development Goals. We are failing in Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Mr. Alex could say something? You could?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a very interesting question for Mr. Alex. What, according to what Snaven has said, we have the human resources, we have the land, like arable land, and we have the means to get what we want. We have these resources already. Now, what is the problem? What are the challenges that African countries are facing in producing food and getting maximum security for food? Yeah, with Mr. Alex. Mr. Alex? Is it on mute? Mr. Alex, can you hear us? Perhaps Mr. Alex can answer the next question. So I'll put it to Mr. Mendy Peter. What would you like to say about that? What are the challenges we're still facing in achieving maximum food security?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges have already been mentioned. I mean, that is in terms of financing, in terms of lacking the know-how. But I just wanted to add on something Senior Eben touched on, and that is the fact that, just to paraphrase, normally the agenda is set outside of Africa. Africans don't take it to themselves. Of course, there is this talk all the time of African problems or African solutions to African problems, but most of the time you will see that the agenda is actually set outside. Because even touched something that is very important, which is climate change and this issue of renewables. Like, who brought that to us? That agenda that we should move away from fossil fuels, which actually most of the world depends on for our energy solutions, was not actually brought to us. We just came to a point wherein scientists, of course, engaged in this field, say that the earth is warming, so we have to do something about it, and it's actually human beings that are causing that problem. That we are actually consuming these fossil fuels, this energy that we generate through fossil fuels, actually cause a lot of environmental damages. When they are emitted to the atmosphere, they destroy the ozone layer, the stratosphere, and then the sun hits down. When the sun shines, it hits directly on our skins, and that's very bad. It's causing, of course, a lot of drought. It's causing this flooding and things like that. But of course, that's a problem. That's an issue. Of course, that's an issue. But then, is that what Africa actually needs? Should we forego our own developmental, processes for renewables, for this agenda that was set elsewhere? Because you have to know, and then we know that actually the development that we've achieved today was powered by fossil fuels. And now, when of course those countries have already gained their development, now they have changed the agenda now. Now let's move away from fossil fuels. But fossil fuels is actually what we have to develop. That is what we have. We do not have like the technology, like we talked about earlier, to generate solar, the nuclear power technology, that we do not have that. Fossil fuels, which is naturally given, that's what we have to develop. But then now, if the agenda is now changed to move away from fossil fuels to renewables, then that means our oil, our gas, we cannot sell it. Nobody's gonna buy it then. So then how do we develop? How do we get money to develop like in other sectors? Now this has to change. That's the problem that I have. Not the intention, of actually cooling down the earth to below 2 degrees, to below pre-industrial levels is cool. That intention is cool. But what I have a problem with is the approach and what's actually happening. Let's take, for example, the process that has been laid out, through the conferences. Of course, we know COP28 is coming this November, COP29 rather. COP28 happened last year, and from the Paris Agreement 2015, they made it now binding. That, of course, since Kyoto 1997, they made it binding that, of course, countries should reduce their emissions to, we should remove, the climate damage to global warming to below 2 degrees. But Africa, how much does Africa produce? I believe Sinabe mentioned that. What percentage of emissions does Africa produce globally? Only 3%. Only 3% of emissions. That is what we produce. The rest comes from the other countries, mostly from the industrialized countries. Now that doesn't mean that they are like some devils or bad. You need that. That's the fact. We need fossil fuels. Of course, you need to get something. There is nothing that we cannot make, we cannot produce without using something that nature gives us. From the chairs, from our clothes, everything has to come from nature. Now, Africa also, we have to look at our environment and see what we have. We use that. Now, I don't want to preach. I don't want to preach. Of course, I'm very good at preaching. But of course, the Bible tells us, Moses, when Moses was crossing the Red Sea with the Israelites, and then the Israelites were approaching. I don't know if any of you read the Bible. The Israelites were approaching, and they were scared. What should we do? What should we do? And then God said to Moses, "What do you have in your hand?" But do you think a mighty God wouldn't have been able to split the sea and then the Israelites cross? But then that tells you that, of course, human beings have to use what they have. Look at your environment, your surrounding. It said just a stick. Moses had a stick. Use that stick and hit the river, and then it will split into two. But God would have done that. But he is saying that human beings have to use what they have. We have to use what we have. When they invite us to these conferences to take part in these treaties, like Paris, it's a good thing, but we have to make our positions clear. We have to make our positions clear that right now this is what we have, and all of you have benefited from this. This is what you use to power your industries. And right now, all of this that is affecting us is because of you. It's affecting us. Africa is taking the brunt of this climate damage. It's because of you. And now you're telling us, now we have to forgo that? I think that's a problem. That's the problem I have with this. So our leaders, once again, when they go to this conference, they have to do that. Because most of the time, again, I was listening to someone, he was like, when, for example, the European Union goes to a conference, they have like 10 representatives present. Now, when Nigeria goes, there's only one Nigeria. How can you counter 10 people from the European Union? Of course, they are going to set the agenda then. The agreement is going to be just based on what they want. That is the thing. We have to be really prepared for this in our representation and in our verbal ability to communicate what we want and what we have to do. I know, like, some African countries are already going, adopting this renewable energy strategy, which is actually a cool thing. But again, it has to be balanced. It has to be balanced. It has to be hybrid. We don't have to forgo our economic development just for what other people want when we are emitting only 3%. 80% of our continent is not powered. When you go to Gambia, it's 50%. Like I said, it's only a few countries in Africa. So why do we have to forgo that? So I think it's a problem. The problem is a problem in the approach that is used.
Thank you very much. Perhaps Mr. Alex is available now. Okay, so apparently Mr. Alex is an expert in migration, conflict, resolution, and development. So I'm pretty sure, I'm certain that he has more experience on this. And Mr. Alex, I would like you to clarify what are the challenges associated with food security in Africa, if you could shed more light on it. Mr. Alex? Can you hear us, Mr. Alex? Mr. Alex, are you there? Okay, so I guess we'll move on. It's Naiben. Please could you shed more light on that?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. Welcome, Mr. Alex. Did you hear my question?
Yes.
Okay, so the floor is yours.
Hello?
Hello, we can
Yeah,
hear
you were asking about the challenges of food security in Africa.
Yes, correct.
Yes, so the causes of food security in Africa, as we have to look at this, one of the things that in my field, in migration, has to do with young, intelligent youth in Africa migrating to the global north or in search of better living conditions. So this in a way is affecting food security in Africa. And why are they going? Some of the causes that we have to look at this is this energy crisis that we are talking about. And earlier contributors or panelists, they made mention about leadership in Africa. I think one of the things affecting Africa today, which I would term as the third world war that Africa is fighting, is actually got to do with leadership, which is being influenced negatively by African youth migrating. Ghana, for instance, this year, from 2020 to 2023, over 40,000 nurses migrated to UK alone, not to talk of Canada, USA, Australia, and other countries. Why are they migrating? All these people are migrating, leaving Ghana, because there are no jobs. The few of them who are also working too, there are no future hopes in them. They have no aspirations as it is in the developed countries. Those who also go through the school, like example, like some of you, a few of you will come back. Why are they not coming back? They are not coming back because of the conditions in Africa, not just Ghana. I've been to Liberia, I've been to Sierra Leone, I've been to Gambia, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. The African youth is in a quest, is in a rush to leave Africa. Why? Because of poor leadership. So my recommendation to this labor migration issue of the African intelligentsia, just like you, is there should be brain gain and the need for a return of the African youth that has migrated to the global north or to the developed country to return. And in returning, the only way that can make us fit in Africa in our own context is to take leadership positions. Don't sit back. When the African youth return and you want to sit back, the society will fight against you. What you want to do, you see that you will not be able to do it. And the best you're likely to do is to return to a society that you feel that you can be accepted, but you can be accepted only as a youth. As you grow, you see that you will not be able to fit in Russia, you will not be able to fit in America, in Canada, and the rest. You can comfortably fit in your home country, in any part of Africa. So this is a little contribution that I would like to make. And before I conclude, one of the panelists made mention of we using our own solutions. In development studies, we call it endogenous development theory. I think this is another area that is look at use our own solutions to tackle our own problems rather than looking elsewhere. We agree in the 21st century we can copy certain development models as accepted, but we also need to look at how best we can look at solving these problems. And then in the case of food security, there's so much increase in unemployment, increase in what do you call it? Our population is increased without corresponding food. And why is so? The African youth, they don't want to enter into agriculture. Leadership has made agriculture so unattractive that the youth want to enter, they don't want to enter into agriculture across the continent. And energy crisis, as we say, there's also a huge demand for energy use without corresponding supply of energy. There's advance of me, the village that I come from, in the early 90s, you could count only one television in the whole town. But today, as I'm talking to you now, we have over 10,000 television sets. They are all craving for energy. The infrastructure that we have is still the same weak infrastructure that we are using to supply energy. So African leaders need to take a look at the energy infrastructure, and then also look at alternative energy sources instead of relying on one source of energy. Germany has no temperature like us, but Germany uses a lot of solar than Africa. And no African country can be compared to Germany in terms of solar usage. Why can't we look at solar and other sources of energy? So I think this is a little contribution I can offer for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex. As much as I would like you to say something on it, I have a very interesting question for you. So, in recent years, according to the African Bank, the African countries imported food materials worth $64.5 billion, and it's expected to increase to $410 billion in 2026, just next year. What do you think the African government can do to stop the process? Maybe not entirely stop it, to decrease it. Because we know the $64.5 billion, if it's put into something else, the food they are imported, they can actually be planted locally. We are talking about rice, wheat, barley, millets, just a common food that people can easily plant and get. Why do we have to import everything? What do you think the African government can do to reduce the costs of importation of food materials? Sine Iben, that question is for you.
Seriously, I wasn't paying attention because I thought you were asking Mr. Alex. But I got one or two things. But before that, let me quickly touch on some points that Mr. Alex made. Yes, we understand that brain drain, that is qualified people that are leaving their countries to other countries, are problematic to Africa. But I don't think that we are the best brains in Africa. I don't think those of us who migrate to other countries and are not willing to return, I don't think I'm a better brain than any other person, in Africa. Let's look at this. You have 10 people which you cannot feed. 3 people leave the country to other countries. It means you are left with 7 people to feed. So why should you cry about the 3 that have left when you cannot feed the 10 that you have? You have 100 people, you cannot feed them. 30 of them said, okay, that's done here, bye-bye. I'm going to another country. And you are still crying for the 30 that you cannot feed to come back and do what? When you leaders in Africa know that when we come back, you are going to strain us. He talked about a friend of his who is studying what? Let a person write the best thesis in Russia, defend it, get graduate diploma, and go to Africa. Let him go and show to the president, this is what I developed. And see where the diploma will end. So, I can finish. Yeah, so it is not about people living in the country. We have best brains still in Ghana. I don't know a course that we do not learn in the university. Go to the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. I don't know any engineer that we don't train over there. But can they manufacture a car? Can they do anything? That is a problem. Then youth in agriculture. I'm teaching some Russian youth English, and they are very, very good. So we just speak as if we are just having communication. So one day I was talking about agricultural stuff, and they didn't know anything about it. They know a lot of things, and I was surprised. And I asked, "Do you study agriculture in school?" He said, "No." What does it mean? What it means is that in Russia, it is the responsibility of the government to provide food for its people. It's not about the youth going to agriculture. It is even these days that we have a lot of people who are trained, who are into white-collar jobs. If in the olden days, when a lot of people were in agriculture, if that could have saved us, we wouldn't have had any issues in those days. But still in those days, when a lot of people were not educated, when a lot of our fathers were farmers, peasant farmers, still people were hungry, still people were dying. The government should own up. You see, it is sad, Mr. Hanif, in Ghana, we have planting for food and jobs. That means the government introduced a very special program that is focused on agriculture. But the government does not have state-owned farms. The government, which has the resources and could have had a very vast land to grow any other plant or whatever that it wanted, it doesn't have. You leave it in the hands of peasant farmers who can cultivate just, few acres of land. Right. So now back to the main question. Maybe Mr. Alex wanted to.
Mr. Alex, do you
Okay, I want to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
So, just to respond to what my brother said. In fact, where you are sitting and coming back, I didn't say come back. Looking at the current situation in Ghana, if I myself am outside Ghana, I won't come back now. So the bottom line I was making is, the leadership should make our African countries attractive for the African youth who has gone to get brain gain to be able to come back. Talking of agriculture, it still boils down to leadership. Like you said, in Ghana, the current government has this planting for food and jobs, which is a fantastic program. But how are we using it? Like Nkrumah used in terms of the state funds. That is absent. There are a lot of people who also has money, they want to enter into agriculture. They can't enter because of lack of leadership. How is leadership playing a role, if somebody may ask me? Our policies and our politics, both local and traditional politics, it affects people who want to enter into agriculture. I have tried it myself. The Ghanaian youth, I've not studied the whole of African youth, but I've studied the Ghanaian youth. The interest is not to enter into agriculture and make something tomorrow. but he wants to live today. This idea is being fueled by the kind of leadership we have today in Africa. They've not made the African youth to save the future in Africa we have today. So the best they can do is to go elsewhere. So you get my point?
Yes, Mr. Alex, we do.
Yes, yes. So if I talk about we returning, that is where the leadership comes. I'm sure you don't like to come back today. And I even made the point that even myself, if I were to be outside, I wouldn't like to come today because of what is going on. But if we have favorable conditions, that what I've learned from Russia, Germany, Canada, or elsewhere, there are opportunities in Africa that I can bring and implement it, and our environment is not even competitive like the developed countries. But that leadership is not there to create that enabling environment for the African youth that has traveled to come back. So I agree with you, you don't have to come. That one, I will never advise any youth to come back today. Because if you come, all that you have learned, the knowledge you've acquired, the leadership style that has been created in Africa today will suppress you that you'll not be able to create. So you can't bring the brain that you gain to Africa. I think I'm done for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex. I know Mr. Peter wants to say something, but we don't have much time and we still have to give questions to the audience. So I'm sorry, we don't have much time. So if there are questions from the audience, we would like to hear them now. Does anyone have a question? Does anyone have a question from the audience?
Okay, so my name is Shay. I'm a student here, like most of the people here. So I am studying international relations. So my question is, I'm going to say, and then I would like to hear from the panelists. So the problem that we have did not start today. You've all seen, of course, the manifestations, by the way. So, and I think that we can stretch this for as long as we want, but it's deep rooted in our society, and this thing's going to be dug out almost immediately. So, I am thinking also that could it be that the problems that we see now could also be related to the lack of patriotism. Let's consider colonialism, for instance, the agitation for independence. These things were not just pursued by Africans in Africa. This is also pursued by Africans in diaspora. Okay, these guys were living in the UK, they were living in Europe, they were living comfortably. But these guys, along with the guys, I'm sorry I'm using guys, so these guys, along with the guys in Africa, they agitated, they used the media, they protested even in Europe, making sure that these guys leave Africa. Okay? So, would it be, for instance, because I feel maybe it's necessary that we also look at this in a broader perspective. Could it be that the challenges that we have, I'm not just limiting this to energy and to food, because like we have said, the common theme here is leadership, leadership factor. So could it be that the lack of patriotism could be one of the main reasons why leadership, for instance, is a problem for us? Because we have people who don't care about their people. We have leaders who don't care about their people. Secondly, also, when people leave, when Africans leave the continent, and then we're not supposed to return when things are rosy. We're supposed to go when things are not. Fix the situation. That's what patriotism is. So could it be that it's something that we should consider, not just because it sounds, I think especially because these things, if we are able to hammer this here, then maybe 10, 20 years from now, when Africans in diaspora come back home and they take leadership positions, maybe it's likely that we would see the changes that we're craving for now. Because we're saying these things, these guys will still go to conferences and will do the exact same thing they've been doing over these years. So that's my comment.
Thank you very much, sir. It's maybe interesting for you to know that most of the leaders we have in Africa also schooled abroad as we are schooling now. In fact, some of them had their entire lives schooling abroad. If that was a solution, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this. You see, let us forget the idea that the best knowledge is gained abroad. Because that's what this conversation is driving us to. You've gone to study, bring the knowledge to your country and make some changes. But the leaders we have, most of them had those opportunities. What have they done with it? You see. So it is a very big thing, right? Like I said, if I were the government of Ghana and I have a lot of people that I cannot feed, I'll just sign contracts with other countries and export some of the people so I can feed the few ones that are there. You see, the point is that no African country is crying about shortage of human resources. No African country. Unemployment rate is increasing, especially post-COVID. A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people send applications to government institutions day in and day out for job positions. They don't get employed. The challenge is not about brain drain. The challenge is not about people leaving Africa. The challenge, like Peter said, is about using what we have to our maximum benefit. It is not about patriotism.
But I think it counts.
It is not about leaders.
It counts also.
It is about leadership.
Yeah, it counts.
It is not about leaders, it is about leadership. The ability to lead is what we lack. The ability to set our priorities right is what we lack. And unfortunately, like I said, we are chasing the countries which are already developed and we're trying to meet their standards. And we're leaving a lot of things behind. So every time we are far behind them, let 2030 end and let them establish maybe another sustainable, or I don't know whatever word they want to say. We are still going to be behind. Unless we come down, educate our people, give them the ability to work within the country, use our untapped resources to our benefit. What does it mean? All the remaining resources that have not been tapped, let us not rush to give them as loans, as collaterals, for loans to come and fix roads which are going to be destroyed in 2 years, in 3 years. Let us go back, keep our natural resources to ourselves, until such a point that we are able to fully train people, get the technology to be able to fully deploy whatever natural resource that God has given us, or maybe if you're an atheist, whatever natural resource that nature has given us, to the benefit of the African people. Otherwise, every other thing that we are doing are cosmetics, and they are not solving any problems as we see.
All right.
Thank you very much. There are more questions going on. Please, okay.
My name is Simeon. I'm the third year student of International Relations. And first of all, thank you for this opportunity to ask a question. Thank you for your deliberate discussion. Thank you, Elijah, for your presentation. And my question is for all speakers. You mentioned many issues that African countries face, and also many rhetorical questions have been asked. And I wonder, just in your opinion, do African countries have some measures, abilities to tackle these issues by their own? You got this question, yeah? Thank you. And the second question, what need does prevail? Like African countries need to develop their education, or they need technologies from more developed countries to solve these issues by cooperation. Thank you.
With regards to the first question, whether we have the abilities, to be frank, those abilities are actually lacking, because if we have had the abilities, of course we would have solved the problems, or by and large have solved the problem, but we lack the technical know-how, the expertise to, like I said earlier, increase our production. When you visit, for example, ministries, for example, of agriculture, or perhaps departments, like when I went to the Gambia, I of course visited these ministries, because again, I want to engage in agriculture, just like Alex. I also want to engage in agriculture. So in these ministries, actually, they are actually packed with, well, people they call experts. Now, not to downplay their achievements academic-wise, they are experts, you know. But I think if we have the right education, if we are experts and we are knowledgeable, like in a certain area, I think again, we have to be able to do something with it. We can't just acquire it just for the sake of it. If you are experts, let's say in agriculture, in crop production, and they have them actually. When I visited, we have to be able, because since I said I want to engage in this, I said, okay, we will attach you to people who are going to help you. When that's the first point. The former president of the Gambia, Yahya Jammeh, had this motto, like, grow what we eat and eat what we grow. So he was very much involved in agriculture. He is what you would say, a kind of leader that you would need to kind of drive the agricultural process of the Gambia. And I actually think that most African countries should emulate that. Right now he's not there, and the agricultural production in the Gambia has actually gone down. But when he was there, he was driving towards food self-sufficiency, because we have abundant land. We have abundant land, and he was actually inspiring people to engage in agriculture. The only problem was that he actually owned the farmlands, everything. It was like a personal property. But at the same time, he was actually producing a lot of food, like rice, and selling it at cheaper prices, affordable prices for poor people. If, let's say, the only problem was making it a personal property, if it was much more privatized, because here again, you even talked about, government owning the farmlands. Usually government can't do anything when it comes to business. That is the problem with government. They are not very good when it comes to business. It should be given actually to private individuals. They can only be like partners to help. Like Japan does that. Japan does that. They kind of partners with the private sector to make sure that they regulate and then kind of set the standards and things like that. African governments can do that, but not actually to own the farmlands, because it becomes something taking to socialism, wherein everything belongs to the government. Now, the other thing is, I went to Guinea-Bissau also. And in Guinea-Bissau right now, I just spoke to my cousin about a couple of days ago, and he said, right now we have a problem of food, like rice in Guinea-Bissau. We don't have enough rice. And that actually shocks me, because when I went there, the same problem was happening, until this day is happening. But guess what? Guinea-Bissau has also abundant land. And they have land that is, how is it called again? That you can grow rice in. And it's very good. Why aren't the Guineans themselves doing this? Why aren't they Of course, rice is very intensive to grow. Rice is very intensive. But why aren't the Guineans doing this? Themselves. It comes back to the issue of the youth. My advice for, both Alex and Senior even is that we have to go back. It's just a matter of when do we go back. Because if we do not go back, I believe Sei mentioned it earlier, we don't have any right to complain. like really. Because the problems that Africa is facing as ours, everyone, we have to be able to also do the dirty work. We acquire knowledge here, we go, we share. Because you can compare right now African countries with Russia, with US when it comes to agricultural production, when it comes to energy production. You cannot compare. These countries are actually way higher than us, and they have learned and they know things we don't know. If they don't want to share, of course, we have to do our part. We have to do our part in actually getting the knowledge we need if they don't want to share. But at the same time, we who are here and actually know some things, we have seen some things, should be willing and prepared to go back and share that back home, no matter how difficult it may be and challenging.
I'm sorry, we don't have much time. We have just 10 minutes left. So we'll take one last question with very brief answer. Kika? That's going to be the last question today. Sorry, Kika, before you ask your question. So, because this is the last question, I would like both panelists to say something, and it was just going to be one sentence, just one sentence. Please. Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Gika. Of course, it pains me to hear an African saying, after my studies, I'm not going home. Like if I ask Peter, are you going home after your studies? And he says, no, I'm not going there. Why? Because my airport is not up to standard. Eben, are you going back home? He says, no. Why? Because the economic system is like weak, or we don't have a better economic system. It actually pains me because I think running away from the problem doesn't solve the problem. We need to face the problem and solve it. So the question here is to them, what can we do as young generation to change these systems, to develop our beloved Africa? What can we do?
Thank you for the question. Like I said, panelists, please, very briefly.
It's a big question, no, because there's one thing to complain and another thing to give a solution. For complaining, everybody has big heads of complaints. But there are challenges. The president of Ghana is a Ghanaian. He grew up in Ghana. I am a Ghanaian. I grew up in Ghana. He is no different from me. The change comes from us. Because, trust me, we can talk of all the problems when I go and sit on that seat in the Flagstaff House. Because I was not trained as an ordinary person to be self-disciplined, to manage my resources well. I get there, I get huge sums of resources, and I mismanage them. So yes, we can do something, and it starts from us. Let everybody see himself as a potential president, as a potential leader who wants to see a change in Africa. Start training yourself behind the scene. If everybody in Africa does this, that means at any point in time when we get to the presidency, we will be able to change things. But permit me to answer the previous questions. I think Mr. Peter left some few other things. Like, of course, we cannot tackle our own problems. We can't. Not even the most developed countries can have full sufficiency to be able to tackle their own problems. But over the years, what we have seen is that people see Africa as people that need charity. When we go to the negotiating table, we go there as businessmen. How do we negotiate deals with these people? International relations will have to shift the focus from seeing Africa as people who are in need to people who are in strategic partnership. Because without Africa, most of the developed countries wouldn't exist, because you have the natural resources. They have multi-billion-dollar companies in Africa taking our oil, taking our gold, taking our cocoa. 60% of the entire cocoa that is produced in the world comes from just 2 countries in Africa. 2 countries, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire. 2 countries. We're not talking of the other countries that produce in limited quantities in Africa. But when it comes to the value chain, we are shortchanged. So the first day I came here, my first set of friends were from Vietnam. And one of them gave me chocolate and asked me, do you know chocolate? I cried. Because if Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire were not existing, perhaps you wouldn't have had access to chocolate in the first place. How are we negotiating these deals? We have gold in Africa. Gold. How can you sit on gold and be hungry? Come on. We have to shift the focus from people seeing us as beggars. When I sit in front of you and I'm negotiating for a nuclear deal for Ghana, and you are the president of Russia, I should be able to look at you in the face and tell you that this is what my country wants. We don't want charity. Give us the money, you take it. That is what we need. Also, you talk about priorities. And I guess your question is very, very intelligent because you are talking about a lot of things and it's as if this is what I told you they want. And you are speaking as though you are president of Russia and I'm a president of Ghana and I sit by you with my big head of complaints and you're asking, gentlemen, I heard all your points. How can I help you? You see, let's start with what we have. We have food. Here we have a lot of forest, but there are no fruits, right? There are no mangoes that are grown. In Africa, if I throw a mango seed at the backyard of my house, in 3 years, I already have a lot of mangoes I'm taking every season. Give people food. We are not asking for a lot. We are not asking for a lot. We are asking for decent lives. Give people decent lives. They will have the ability to think and develop. You cannot think when you are hungry. When you go to write your research and you are hungry, you just sit there, you look at the paper. Even if you know the thing, you can't write it. Give people food. And you have it. You see, it's very sad that you have the land, but you don't have the fertilizers. You have to depend on other countries for fertilizers. So that when there is any small, even if a mosquito bites maybe somebody in the western part, oh, because the mosquito has bitten somebody, no, there is a shortage, there's a blockage in transportation, so we are not getting fertilizers. We were sitting there in our country, we were using our green manure to do our things, because we didn't know all these white people fertilizers. They came to our land, introduced us to fertilizers. We started using fertilizers. They said, no, don't use chemical fertilizers because they are destroying the food. Now, we are now going back this and that, you see. So, what we need, if I were the president of Ghana, what my priority would be is to give people food. And Neil said amen.
So, just like in closing also, I would just say two things, like very quickly. So, because I love history, I would like refer back to history to make like two conclusions. So when the president of former president J.J. Rawlings actually went to Ghana in 1986, at the time I think it was Zhou Enlai, the president of China, well, chairman, of course, Zhou Enlai. So he said to Rawlings, actually, because China was coming up with this socialism with Chinese characteristics, and it doesn't matter what a cat is, let it be able to catch mice. That was his phrase. And then he said to J.J. Rawlings, do not copy us. Do not copy us. Now, I would kind of deviate a little bit from Zhou Enlai to say, like Mr. Alex said earlier, you can get some things. Okay, what's right? And Nigeria is doing that with the free economic zones in Lekki. They are doing that now in Lagos, I believe. If that works, fine. If it doesn't, you kind of discard it. So that means we have to be careful about what we copy. That's one of the conclusions. And the second conclusion is, again, history. Like what the West achieved, most of the countries in the West did not just come or fall from anywhere. The British, for example, the freedom, it didn't come like from anywhere. So in 1215, they forced King George, the British king at the time, to sign what you call the Magna Carta. Very short, actually, you can look at it. And what was it? Because the king was very autocratic. You jail people without You jail people without any trials, you seize their property and the like. So the British people, what they did was they scolded the king, they rose against the king. They rose against the king and were like, now you have to make sure you sign this treaty that you cannot jail anybody without trial, and you're not going to seize anybody's property. What I'm trying to say is, we Africans, if our leaders are not doing it right, we have to scold them. We have to take them to account. We do not have to be afraid. If it means sometimes we are cowards, afraid of dying. If it means actually dying for a cause that you love, your country, so that you can go the right path, we have to do it. So let's take that up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iben and Mr. Pitt. If I was your teacher, I'll probably give you 2. Because I said just few sentences and you read the whole textbook. Anyway, thank you very much for the great contribution. And we've come to the end of today's episode. Once again, I want to appreciate our audience for making it to this place today. We really appreciate you coming, and we hope to see you in more of the Bantaba show. I would also like to thank Mr. Peter and Mr. Iben again, our panelists, for the wonderful contribution they've had today. Also, I would also like to introduce myself once again. I'm Christina, I'm from Nigeria. Mr. Peter is from Gambia, Mr. Iben is from Ghana. We heard him saying Ghana and Ghana. Also, I wouldn't forget our online speaker, Mr. Alex Ingirikma. Thank you so much for your wonderful contribution. And to our online audience, we say thank you also. In our subsequent shows, we hope to see you. Have a wonderful day and bye. Hello guys, we just concluded this episode of Bantaba. If you're watching this video, it means you already know how it went. I can bet you had a great time. We will be here next week, same time, same venue. Stay tuned. It's your favorite host, Christina. Bye.